On today's On the Other Hand, we talk with someone working to help Arkansans come together and make our state better. Here's a sneak preview.
We have ground rules that allow us to talk to each other with dignity, but we're not trying to change each other's minds about an issue as much as we are trying to increase understanding of different perspectives.
This is On the Other Hand. A podcast sponsored by Braver Angels Arkansas, where hope and common ground meet. Each episode features community leaders from Arkansas and beyond, sharing stories and insights on how together we can strengthen our relationships and our communities. In the first part of our conversation with April Chatham-Carpenter, who is the new state coordinator of Braver Angels Arkansas, April spent a little time describing for us her background in communication and how she got involved with Braver Angels. Now, let's get to this final part of our conversation with April Chatham-Carpenter. One of the things I want you to address, April, has to do with this new movement at National Braver Angels to get involved as a community, even when there are differences, and to work for common goals. You know, that idea of community has become more and more important to me as I get older. I appreciate the role of community. And my concern is that a lot of people out there don't think of themselves as part of a community, or they don't appreciate how easily they can do something like that, or how important it is. So can you give us some thoughts about how the average citizen can play the role of a member of a community, whether or not they're actually a leader, but participate in being a community that's helping address some things that we need to address?
You're bringing up lots of things and paths I could go down to. So I'll take a couple of them and see if it helps with our conversation today. One of them is the community, lack of community. With the internet, with social media, we do not have to rely on face-to-face porch conversations like we used to. Author wrote many years ago a book called Bowling Alone. In his book, he argued that we have lost, we quit joining. We quit being joining as people. And so, and we used to be, part of and he used really a bowling league, right? He used to be part of these places where we would hang out together and do fun things. Or maybe you were part of a Lions Club or a Rotary Club, or you were part of, even church attendance has gone down, right? And even in churches, I think about this. I mean, our church right now, in the spring, we have a lot of these small groups that start up, but how many of our actual congregants go to a small group? Or do we just show up on a Sunday, sit next to our pew mates, and then walk out and leave? Are we really joining? Are we really building community? And I think all of us as human beings need to ask, what is the role of that for ourselves? So I'll kind of just let maybe the listeners take that on themselves. Do they need it? If they aren't having community, in the way I'm defining community is, I am spending time in relationships with others. So it could literally be, I'm sitting next to my neighbor on their porch or having dinner with them.
One of the things that to me is important about that, it has a healing influence if you are together with people who have differences, but you're there for a common goal. I'm thinking of something that a lot of younger folks do these days, kickball leagues. Okay. So if you enjoy that, have the social interaction, you have the physical stuff, but also you're having people, because of this one interest of kickball, that may have very different political views or very different experiential base. And by them getting together and understanding and developing relationship with people who are different and appreciating them as real people who are decent, has a healing influence on what would otherwise be a potential divisive kind of thing.
And that's exactly what they're talking about. Pickleball is another example of where people are kind of picked up, right? And they have to have partners to play, right? So, I mean, you can play with two people, but it's more fun if you've got four, I think, typically. And so, if we aren't reaching out, what is it that we're filling our social, emotional, spiritual even needs with? And I think that's a question that every individual can answer for themselves. Now, I wanted to say something else related to community, though, in terms of how it relates to working across divides. And you hinted at this when you were talking about that if you're in a athletic league, for example, soccer league or pickleball or you said kickball, you know, you aren't focusing on your individual political differences. If I'm in a church group, unless I'm actually in a small group, unless I'm actually looking at a book or having a civil dialogue over a particular topic, I'm focusing on something that we agree on potentially, or we may have differences in opinion. I mean, I'm part of a Bible study right now at my church on the Sermon on the Mount, and so I'm like, we're talking about Bible stuff. Do we have disagreements about that? Yeah, but I have no idea the people sitting around the table what their affiliations are politically. I don't even know what their socioeconomic status is unless they share that they're in need. I don't know what their educational background is. I might know if they're married or have kids because they maybe have shared that, or they couldn't be at a particular meeting because their kids were sick or something, but I don't really know. So I'm focused on something that's bringing us together and having dialogue around that. But when we are in the kind of communities that we're talking about in Braver Angels, it becomes more obvious that we've got differences among us because we are talking through our differences. And that's harder, Glenn. It's harder than just showing up and signing up for a Bible study at my church, to be in that kind of community with another. Because all of a sudden, especially in the South, where we're taught, you don't talk about politics or religion, because that was going to cause fights or it's not polite. It goes against our grain. So it's much easier to sit in front of my TV when I go home from work than to have to go out to a Braver Angels event or a couple of nonprofits that are working together on a community issue to do that. Now, you ask the question, though, how do we get involved if we want to do that? You have to ask yourself, what do you care about? Because you're not going to want to be involved in solving a solution or a problem that you don't care about. So if you care about the fact that there's a traffic pattern in your city that's a problem, or you care about the fact that they have now closed down certain kinds of restaurants in a particular part of your city, or you care about urban sprawl, okay, whatever it is that you care about. I'm just picking some that are not necessarily red-blue issues. Or as one person was telling me recently, as I had stepped into this state coordinator, in her community, there are still racial issues, which I would argue probably in most communities there are. If you care about whether there should be a jail in your backyard, if you care about whether there's going to be another gambling casino, I'm just picking some that I've seen come up in Arkansas. If you care about whether homeschoolers should be getting voucher money, okay? I mean, you find other people who want to talk about that with you. And if possible, try to find people who have different opinions than you as well. Because if you come just as a lobbying appearance of a lobbying group, then you're going to be seen as not necessarily credible because you don't have a solution that involves the whole community. So I've got to involve people from my community, but that means I have to have conversations and kind of hang out in places that if I'm just sitting in front of my TV because it's easier, and I'll be honest, it's easier. Why do I need to have community? I've got my work community. I've got my church community. I don't need any more community. I'm an introvert and I'm tired at the end of the day. I mean, that's what I say sometimes.
Well, we've talked a lot about how your work, your career, your current motivations overlap into the world of Braver Angels. So, if someone's curious about Braver Angels, but I don't know, hesitant, maybe not sure it's the best approach for them right now, what would you want them to know about the organization and its role?
I might start out by actually not just telling them about the organization, but asking them about how their life is going. The reason why I might start out that way is because if there's not a need, they don't care what I'm going to say about Braver Angels. So I need to identify something that might create that might make them realize there's a need. Okay. So how I would go about doing that is maybe, have you ever lost a friend or struggle with what to say at a family dinner when politics gets heated? 75% of people probably would say yes, maybe even higher than that. Have you ever been frustrated with something that a politician has said, even on your side? I bet I would get a whole bunch of hands on that one too. Okay. Have you ever wondered when you see something going on that you're dissatisfied with, whether it be at your school or some other place, man, I wish those people would fix that. Okay, so now I've asked three questions that might get them to thinking about, yeah, yeah, yeah. So now I've got, I mean, they talk about this in persuasion theory, right? You've got kind of this, your foot in the door, right? Now I'm not going to go up and do cold calls on people's doors that I don't know. Um, well, boy, do I have the organization for you. So here's my elevator pitch. Now I wouldn't say it like that. I would start out with probably a personal, more of a connection to just say, I have been changed. And I have been changed because I have built relationships in the last year, in the last 3 years that I thought I would never have built. And I have been able to have difficult conversations about things like politics that I was never willing to have before. And it's all because of an organization that has taught me how to lean into the discomfort of speaking and listening in ways that is respectful towards people who disagree with me. I don't get it perfectly. I don't do it perfectly. I didn't do it perfectly this week, but I am better than I used to be. And my relationships have been helped as a result. If somebody would ask me at a dinner party, what are you doing with that organization of Braver Angels now? And, what's it doing in Arkansas? I'd have a different kind of answer because now they're asking me specifically about Arkansas. But if they were to say, why are you still volunteering with that, with everything else that's going on? How can you even stand to be around those people? That's when I would go into the more personal.
Well, clearly, your involvement with and the learning from Braver Angels has made a difference in your life and one that continues to motivate you daily. But speaking of daily, what one thing do you recommend people try just this week, if you want to, just narrow it down? What can they try to begin to feel what you have developed in terms of your feelings about the Braver Angels approaches over the years? What can they do now to get a toe in the water?
I know we go back to this a lot in Braver Angels, but we use something called the lap skills. And the the first three parts before you ever share your perspective are so key to me, the L, the A, and the first P. If I were to say you're in a conversation, you hear somebody talking about something, you're choosing to speak up or to not speak up, you're formulating in your mind what I could say that would make me look smart or make them look bad, rather than that, or rather than just being silent or walking away, maybe take a minute, a breath, hold your hands out with open hands and say, let me see if I can really listen to what is going on for them. And I show that I'm listening in lots of ways, right? I mean, that's The L part is the listening, but the A part is how I show it. So maybe I listen to them and wow, it sounds like this is really important to you. I'm acknowledging something's important to you. Or wow, gosh, this has really made I can feel the frustration. Or maybe I say something like, I actually I probably don't have the same perspective of you, but I actually agree with what you said on that, and I think that was horrible. Okay. So now they've heard, they know I've listened, right? So that's the L and the A. But the P, before I ever share my perspective, is equally as important, which is the pivot. And it's how I can then say, I have a different perspective, or I have something else I'd like to share. Do you have time for me to share it? It's asking for permission to share my thoughts rather than just blasting it out on blah. Now, we also talk about how to make your perspective be heard as well, which is the last P. So it's LAPP. But I think those first three, and sometimes I'll be honest, John, anymore, I don't even care about sharing my perspective because I just want to know them better. So when my sister and I had that conversation about why she voted the way she did, I wasn't going to try to persuade her. That was not the purpose of the conversation. The purpose of the conversation for me was curiosity and understanding and love. Now, I still continued to block her, and I told her that. I block you because it makes me, I want to respond back, and I'm not going to respond back in ways that are good. It's better not to show on social media. You know, I loved her in that moment. I showed I cared.
React to this, if you will, April. I feel included in listening is the part of listening that is reiteration. That is, what I think I heard you say was blank, because in that sub conversation, we often find that what I thought the other person said is not in fact what they said. It's where my biases took me.
Exactly.
And when I take the time to go, so, and not to be trite, but let me see if I got what you just said. We often find differences there that could have sent us off in 180-degree angles.
And absolutely right. And even the way that I say that comment about, I think this is what I've heard you say, look how humble that is. I am, again, trying to approach this through learning. I might be wrong. I think I heard you. I could do that acknowledgement statement with, well, you just said this, and that's what that means. Now, all of a sudden, because of my tone of voice and my assumption that I knew what they meant, has cut the whole conversation off. Because what was happening, if that's really true, is I didn't have open hands. So my listening, my heart wasn't there. Now, there are times in which I am emotionally, I call it when I teach, my lizard brain takes over. Glenn, psychologist, would call it the amygdala hijack. It's that little part of our brain that recognizes if there's a threat or not, and it absolutely takes over every part of our being that makes us logical and nice creatures. Okay. And so when that takes over, it doesn't matter. I'm going to say something that I regret. And you have to be willing to also repair that afterwards and say, oh, wow, I did not know I was so angry. I need to step back, take a breath, and just go to the bathroom a minute and come back and start this conversation over. Or maybe you have to apologize afterwards, like I did, which was not even a political conversation with a colleague, in which I just was out of control. And I was getting ready to go in and teach the listening and civil dialogue class. I'm like, what? I went in and told the students what I did, and they were just their mouths just you said that? Yeah, that was bad. And I'm like, yeah, it was bad. Now I got to fix it. And it's much harder to fix it than it would have been to sit there and had open hands and deep breaths initially. I carry around in my pocket, this is from the Stoics, okay, because I have this thing that comes into my inbox, a daily Stoic listserv is what I call it. Sometimes I'll post it on Facebook. But this particular one is delay is the remedy. And on the back, there's a Latin word called pausa reflecta. I probably am not saying those words right, but it's like a mirror. It's not really. But if I just look at myself while I'm getting ready to say that, see all the stuff on my face, and then delay, take a deep breath, put my hands out, or say, if you were hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, you should halt the conversation. Hungry, angry, which often is hangry. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, you should not have that conversation. I walk away and make another time to have it.
Let me give you an opportunity, April, to address something that I have, and I think we've talked about this. This is a common criticism we get from some quarters about Braver Angels. Some people mistakenly see us as just wanting everybody to play nice and get along. Like that we don't, and part of it's because we don't take overt political sides. That's part of the Braver Angels approach is we will not advocate for or against a specific politician, ideology, or party. We instead promote key values of respectful engagement with people who are different from us and the importance of maintaining a democratic constitutional republic. We do stand for that. But I wonder, how would you address those people who criticize us saying, but it's really serious now. We need to take a stand. We need to do something or we're going to lose our country. And you guys are not taking a stand. What would you say?
Well, first of all, I would tell them to read our Arkansas Democrat Gazette editorial from, let's see, it would have been February the 8th, that Glenn, you and I wrote, because we really talked about that in that editorial. But let me just kind of bring out a couple of things from that related to Braver Angels in particular. There are times where we need to call out things, calling out abuses, calling out things that we see that are not right, that we need to stand, that we need to protest, that we need to do that kind of work. That is not the lane that Braver Angels is in, but Braver Angels supports that as an important part of our democratic republic. Okay, free speech. All right. We are in the lane of calling in. And that lane of calling in is the lane of, I am believing that I am in relationship with you in good faith. Now, not everybody's in good faith. We know that. They might come into a conversation saying that they really want to listen and they may not want to listen. I may be in that situation at times. But what we do in order to have that lane, it's a wide lane, okay, is we offer examples of how to do that and opportunities for people to get involved in doing that. So I'll take one that's kind of on one of the extremes of that lane, but it still is a calling in lane, I would argue, not a calling out lane, although some people would say that the kinds of things that they do in this particular event type are more potentially like calling out than calling in. Okay. And that's the Braver Angels debates. Now, we have never had one of those in the state. I would love, Glenn, for us to do that, okay? For us to have one on a college campus, for example, or to have one on an issue in a community, okay? And a Braver Angels debate is a parliamentary style kind of debate. We're not used to that in our nation. We usually have debates where people are yelling at each other and they're spewing things out of in that lizard brain kind of moment, or they're speaking past each other because they're using different kinds of information as their basis for their arguments, okay? But this one has ground rules and has people that are keeping people to using respectful language. So the way it operates, really, really briefly, is that you've got a chair who is in charge of making sure people keep the ground rules. You have a topic that has clear to at least two sides to it. Doesn't matter if it's a blue or red topic, doesn't have to be. And you have initially a speaker that speaks in the affirmative on the topic, and then two or three people that ask questions to the chairperson about what the speaker just said. They don't address it to the actual speaker, so the chairperson can make sure that it's in a way that is respectful to the other person, but it can be a pointed question. Okay. The speaker then chooses to answer however they want to, and then you turn next to the other side, the person speaking against the resolution. They have their chance. Then you have people that are asking them questions. It goes back and forth and back and forth, and you really get a big picture idea of kind of the all different ways of looking at the particular perspective. Okay, so that's one way, and in some ways, I think people are calling out when they're speaking at times, and they are calling out in the questions, but they're not doing it in a protest way. They're doing it in a very organized fashion. Okay. Then we've got the more calling in kinds of things, which are the one-to-one conversations. Okay. That's the totally other extreme, where there are guides on the site, braverangels.org site, that you can actually, how do you go to the experience? How do you experience one-to-one conversations guides? And they can be about red, blue. They can be about rural, urban. They can be about race. They can be about faith. I think there's even one on age. Okay. And so there's one on if a person's a person from Israel versus Gaza, or Palestinian Israeli conversation. And there's one on the golden rule too, because different places, different traditions have different kind of golden rules. But that's a calling in, and that one has very guided discussion questions about learning the stories of the other and taking turns with timing and what do you see in common with each other. Most of them are over 2 one-hour conversations that you set up. So it doesn't have to be all at the same time. And then in the middle, we have all of these workshops and opportunities for people to learn how to go about actually depolarizing within, or having a difficult conversation, or experiential workshops that are common ground workshops. Glenn, I remember early on in Braver Angels in Arkansas, we did a common ground workshop. I said to myself afterwards, I'm never going to do one of these again. It was about how to teach race in the school systems, or something that was pretty controversial, and more controversial today than it was back then, I think, perhaps. And I just felt like people they weren't staying with the ground rules. They were actually being mean to each other. And we try within these workshops to have ground rules where the moderators can say, absolutely, that did not relate to our ground rules, so I'm going to cut you off right there. And let's move to the next person. But sometimes moderators don't do that as well as others. And so we have to be, realize that we're also growing. But common ground workshops and red-blue workshops, if somebody wants to say, back to the question originally, are all Braver Angels just trying to get everybody to move to the middle? Just go to a common ground workshop or a red-blue workshop and observe it. Just go and be an observer. And I think you will see we have ground rules that allow us to talk to each other with dignity, but we're not trying to change each other's minds about an issue as much as we are trying to increase understanding of different perspectives.
We have a convention coming up. Braver Angels convention is coming up here in Philadelphia, I believe, for the 250th anniversary of our country. And I want you to just briefly tell people what they should know if they are considering attending, and actually get people to understand that anyone can attend. You don't have to be an active leader in Braver Angels to do this, and why it might be a good idea.
I've attended one of these, and it was in Gettysburg. And I think, Glenn, you've attended one too, prior to COVID. And I can tell you what I personally got out of it. You're in a room with 500, 600, 700 people who are all from different political perspectives. Now, I really resisted initially when I came in, and I'm going through a line of signing in, right? I'd already gotten approved to come, and they're usually held on college campuses, so usually in dorms. Okay, so you get to eat in cafeterias, and it's kind of fun to be able to do those kind of things. But they made us wear name tags that had lanyard colors of what we signed in as. Red, blue, or yellow, I think was the color they picked for other. And I immediately reacted because I didn't want to be known as only that, because a person sees that and they then label me as only that. But what I failed to recognize was what was going to happen the rest of the week. I had no idea. It was the first Braver Angels convention I'd ever been at. And what happened was that I actually got to seek out conversations with people across the political aisle that I would never have known where they stood. So I'm sitting with them at lunch, and all of a sudden they've got a blue lanyard on. I don't have to go looking. I'm just getting to know them as a person. And all of a sudden, my idea of blueness becomes bigger than what I've been told in the media it is. So part of the joy of that conference is getting to meet people who you know have a political side that are so much more beautiful than just their political leaning, and getting to have those conversations. So part of it's that, but also the programming that happens during the week allows you to be in smaller groups where you are getting to have, I attended a first in-person debate. And although I didn't speak, I got to watch it. And I was like, it was on abortion. And as I listened to people speak about that, I'm like, oh, I thought I've not had that life experience. And oh, wow. Do I need to have more conversations with people? I'm still very pro-life, but my gosh, what would this be like if I actually sat down and tried to understand better? And so is it trying to move me to the middle? No, it's just I'm still going to be pro-life. I just may be pro-life from conception to death now, and not just pro-life just for one pro-life issue, but it broadened me. Okay. But there are other events. There were opportunities to be able to actually go and talk to people who had done things in their communities that were really cool, so that I could learn about different citizen-led initiatives. There were it was professional development. I go to conferences for my own professional development that were academic conferences. And here's a conference I can go to for professional and personal development. Now, because it relates to my actual things that I teach in my classes, it's also professional development for my work, so that I can become a better, more ideologically diverse thinker and be okay with when somebody in my classes says something that is very different than I ever expected.
One thing I would add to this idea, if people would consider going to the convention, they try to have an equal number of blues and reds. Okay. So if you're going from Arkansas and you're blue, you really need to find a red counterpart. Or if you're red, you pretty much reds can go anytime, anywhere, because there's more blues wanting. So we really encourage folks with the conservative reddish viewpoint to attend.
So
I'm,
signing up together is
that's
in the
ideal, yeah.
application form is what you almost have to do, is you say, it asks you, who are you signing up with another person? If you're a blue, if you're a red, you will get in most likely if you have a legitimate reason for being there. If you're going to say, because there's a place of justification for what you're hoping to get out of the convention. If you say, I really believe this organization is a piece of crap, and I'm going to go to try to, really pull it down, you're probably not going to get in if you're red or blue. Okay. But if you're truly a seeker and want to know more, if you're a red, you'll get in most likely.
Yeah. And we can help if people are interested and aren't sure how to have that happen. We can become a clearinghouse. So just contact us and we'll handle that.
April, any final thoughts you'd like to share with listeners as they think about their own relationships as a result of hearing the three of us converse today?
Absolutely. And this came from a recent thing that happened to me, and I don't know how quickly this would be published, so it may be outdated by the time you all get to publishing it, and that's okay. It still relates. I would not recommend that you try to have these kind of conversations over social media. I oftentimes will post things on social media that are my thoughts, or I'll repost something that somebody else posted that I really thought was very good. And I never know and I'm talking about Facebook in particular, I never know how that's going to land with another person. Now, many times I'm calling out when I'm doing that. Okay, I'm not calling in, I'm calling out. I'm actually trying to point out something that I think is good and that needs to be modeled, or I am pointing out something that I hate, okay, or thinks that doesn't represent what I would say is dignity towards others. And you'll see most of the time that's the kind of thing I post, unless it's just pictures of my pets or something. But how it lands with another, I cannot control. I can't control that if I go to my out of my office today after this interview and I say good morning to somebody. I can't control how that's going to land with somebody either. Okay. But there's more chance in that interaction that I have outside my office door of being able to follow through on the nonverbal expression of another person and be able to kind of get an idea of, are they teasing? Are they not? Are they, just tired? Are they not? It's easier for me to catch some of those things and be able to respond in the real moment. Okay. When I reposted something about the Super Bowl halftime show, the thing that I was proud about the responses, I will have to say this, Glenn, I think you'll find this interesting, is that the responses were from a variety of perspectives across the political and religious aisle. So, which means that maybe I'm not in as much of an echo chamber as I thought. Okay, because echo chamber means that I'm only getting posts from other people. That means that people are seeing my posts from a variety of different perspectives. But it was so difficult for me not to just go in and correct the responses. That's not what I meant. Or think about it this way. I think I ended up responding a couple of times to the responses. But these people don't even know each other. Some of them are from my past in Iowa. Some of them are from my past in Arkansas. Some of them are relatives in Texas. Some of them, I'm like, they don't even know each other. Okay. And they are really unhappy. Some of them with me and some of them with each other. My husband and I had, this is the other conversation I was going to have an example. He says, why did you post it? And I'd ask myself that. What were you hoping to get out of it when you posted it? I'm not going to answer that question, but it was a great question. I initially reacted to him asking me that because I thought because he asked it with a why, was like accusing me of that was a bad taste. You shouldn't have done it. But really, he really just wanted to know. So don't engage in what you hope is going to be a political conversation on social media. We have a whole e-learning course on how to use social media in Braver Angels. It's free. People can go and take a look at it. But it's one of those places where it has caused our divide to become stronger. Both the echo chamber effect of it, right? Where the things I like, I get more of. Okay. So now I'm only seeing things that are like me. Okay. And the fact that I can't see the person, I can't do the lap skills with that.
April, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it, and we appreciate your stepping up in leadership in Arkansas. Thank you for being here.
It's been my pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed the final part of today's conversation. If you liked what you heard, share the episode with a friend.
We hope April's story gave you a little bit more hope and a reminder that we can, together, do good things. On the Other Hand is sponsored by Braver Angels Arkansas, a community of citizens working together to bridge the partisan divide and build a stronger, more connected Arkansas.
Music was composed by Randall Standridge of Jonesboro, Arkansas, and performed by the University of Northern Colorado Symphonic Band, Dr. Richard Main, conductor.
I'm your host, Glenn White.
And John O'Brien.
Join us in working to make our relationships and communities better.